I will teach you how you can find the best plan in any chess position. So here it is black to move, and your goal is to figure out the best move for black. So I will teach you a thinking system you can use to find the best plans. The first thing that we will always do is we will make a list with candidate moves. So that is a list with all the potential moves we would play, and then we are going to select which one we are going to play. If you are playing online in a rapid game, of course you don't have that much time, so you don't want to make a massive list. We want to really identify the moves that might have the most impact on your position, and also moves of which we are sure they are not any mistakes, because that is still the biggest priority, just not making any mistakes. So how do you figure out your candidate moves? The first thing I always check is CCT, checks, captures, and threats. Those are oftentimes the best moves if they are possible in your position. Checks, we don't have any checks. Captures, we do have one capture, which is this one, but I don't think it is a smart move here. Because if we take, we basically remove one of our central pawns, get one of their flank pawns to get closer towards the center, plus now they are more free to play e4 in the future because our pawn which was blocking that is gone. So this capture would be a bad one. Then all that's left is the T for threats. And threats are simple attacks, usually attacks in which we attack a piece which is not defended. For example, I think this knight um, might be a potential target for attack. For example, with a move like queen to a5. So from my CCT, I basically identified only one potential move here, which is to play queen to a5 and attack the knight, which I don't think is a terrible move. It won't lose you the game. But I also don't see a huge benefit from it, since they will probably just defend and then our queen is somewhat, yeah, to the side of the board. Okay. The next thing that I want to do is I want to take a look at the pawn structure and also the piece placement to identify any potential plans. So you can see that we have so many pawns on the light squares and we have a bishop stuck within the pawn chain. So this will be a terrible bishop for quite a while. It's going to be hard to activate it, maybe with b6 and then getting the bishop somewhere here. That might be a future plan. But all of the pawns on the light squares also means we have some weaknesses on the dark squares. And this bishop is making that very obvious. Basically attacking straight into our position, attacking all of these potentially weak squares. And what I am thinking about, just based on the pawn structure, is that I might want to play something like b6 and develop my bishop. Makes a lot of sense, because then we can get it a little bit more active into the game. But I'm always also a little bit annoyed by the fact that we have so many dark squared problems. The enemy bishop can basically even come in, target or rook. If you were thinking, okay, I'll try to chase this bishop and get it to move, well, it's just going to move inside of your position. So from calculating based on the pawn structure, I have now identified that we have a problem with our light squared bishop. So b6 is a potential move that we might play as well. Pawn to b6 to activate the bishop. But I'm also worried about our problems that we have on the dark squares. Is there a move that we can play to stop that? I actually think there is a move as well. Queen e7, which activates the queen on this diagonal and also eliminates one of these annoying problems. So what is the best move in this position? Of course, there are oftentimes multiple good moves, but I think if you were thinking about playing something like b6 to activate your bishop somewhere, if you were thinking about queen a5, or if you were thinking about queen e7, those are the best plans. The move I will play is queen to e7. I like this one the most because we are eliminating this one problem that we have. We are keeping the queen flexible here because I think she would be a little bit offside over there, and we still have this plan in the future. The big advantage with doing a calculation like this is that after you have made your move and your opponent makes a move, you don't have to start calculating from zero because we still have the middle game plans from our previous calculation. So we still know that we have a light square pawn structure, which means this bishop is terrible. We still know that we have some dark squared problems, but we somewhat fixed it by playing queen here. The only thing we really need to do now is to look what has changed with the last few moves. So we have eliminated some of the problems. That's fine. They have played this, which protects that square. So this entire plan with going in with the queen, it's not really possible anymore. Okay. Other than that, I think it's still very, very obvious. that we want to activate this bishop. In general, whenever the position has changed, it is smart to do a new CCT check, but oftentimes there won't really be much new. There is no check, the capture is still bad, so we don't need to recalculate it. And when it comes down to threats, I don't think we have many easy threats. Maybe knight e4 could potentially be a threat attacking this knight. That could be something that we can play. But again, I think at the end of the line, it is a lot of exchanges, although it might potentially be something we can consider. So from the CCT, I will now add this move here, which is knight to e4. And other than that, pawn structure piece optimization, I think we still have the plan to play b6. What I will usually do in this position is just continue with the plan that we already had, and that is to develop our bishop. I think this might also be a possible move, if that is what you wanted to play here. You could probably play this because you are opening up your own bishop. But again, this is a plan that will be in the position anyways. So what I will do is I will play b6 first, and then we can still go for this plan in the future. Okay, so again, two moves happened. What we need to do now is we need to check what has changed in this position. So since this pawn is here on b6, we are basically free to develop our bishop to b7. We also have to watch out what did they do while they played the queen here, which means they might be trying to exchange off our bishop with their bishop. Is this really a huge problem? I think in this particular position it's not really a problem because we already had so many dark squared problems. I don't mind if this bishop actually trades itself off. If you really want to keep your bishop active, you can always try that. For example, you can try to move your rook as well, and then if they go in, sometimes you can try to just move back. For example, bishop here to a8. So that is something that you can consider. It's a little bit high level, but this is a potential plan that you can always use to keep your bishop alive. So what I am thinking about here is basically two plans. One is to play bishop to b7, or bishop to a6. I think both of those are actually decent to activate the bishop. The other one is to react to my opponent's plan and to do something to safeguard this bishop here. But I think I will allow them to go for the trade here because I don't mind. But keep in mind this maneuver, because many beginner players actually don't know that this is a potential maneuver. Which will be the best? I honestly think it might be more interesting here to go to the a6 square. Because our bishop will be more open and we already have somewhat of a team up here with these two pieces on this c4 pawn. So I will play my bishop here to a6. Okay, and they don't go for this. Instead, they play the bishop here. Now, we have to calculate again. But I hope that you, just like I do in this position, feel like white made somewhat of a mistake. We are first going to do CCT, checks, captures, and threats. No checks, there are captures, and I think those captures might be quite interesting. First of all, they are allowing us to capture their bishop. And their bishop was one of the most annoying pieces, or knight was one of the most passive pieces. So in general, this trade looks interesting. Plus, I think at the end of the variation, we have a threat to win a pawn here. I think we might also have a threat to win a pawn here. So this looks like a really promising move here, this capture of the bishop. One other thing we could potentially do is think about capturing here. They capture this, and then we capture with our bishop here. We do have to be a little bit careful that we are opening, not like that, opening up their bishop. So always be a little bit careful with this move. But I think here, just based off CCT, I can identify that this is probably the best plan. They attack, I go back, and now we have a double threat here. We also have a double threat here. So it looks to me like we will be winning some material. But my opponent is playing a very, very smart, high-level defensive maneuver. They are playing queen to f4, which I didn't calculate, to be honest. So we will have to figure out what to do right here. Queen to f4 protects this and this. So basically, winning this pawn doesn't work. That would be, at least I don't think it works. That would be blundering a piece, although maybe we might have some trick with queen to c7 actually, to pin the knight. But things are getting very complicated. Probably they can sacrifice the knight back and we would have some line like this. So this capture doesn't really look like it's going to work anymore. The other capture that we have was this one, but our bishop can't capture because the queen is protecting that sideways. But since we have done such great calculation and planning up to now, we should be able to figure out the rest remaining moves. And anyways, it's great that their dark squared bishop is now gone. Um, so what can we play here? I think there are multiple plans, but we have so many threats. We have this threat and we have this threat, and there is just one piece that's making everything impossible, which is this queen. So if I can get that queen to move, the entire position collapses basically. We get a very active bishop, we might even win this pawn. So what I am thinking about here is there a way we can make this queen move? Maybe even if it's a slow plan, for example this, I have to figure out a move for my opponent. Let's just play a move, and then pawn to g5. And I know this looks a little bit scary. We are moving pawns on our king side, which is in general not something I recommend, but I think it might be a plan here, because this queen will eventually have to move, and this position, I just know it is going to collapse at some point. Let's say they go here because they want to guard everything. We can attack the queen again. The queen has to move, and yeah, at some point things will start collapsing and some of these pawns will start dropping. So it's a very high level plan. I think playing this, it's a little bit complex if you are low rated, but I hope that you were able to understand why I think this is a very good plan. Of course, before we continue, we also need to watch out what they are doing, but basically they are attacking something which is already protected so many times, so we can just go ahead and attack their queen. One thing that I didn't mention is, yes, they can always sacrifice the knight, and I think that is what most players would probably be afraid of, but it's not really doing anything, right? They just give away a knight for a pawn. They still have to figure out something with the queen, and we don't really have a huge problem here. We can even protect it further, or with f6 as well, if that would be necessary. Okay, so they are moving back the queen, and I think we are now just in a position where if you do the CCT calculation, checks, captures, threats, I hope you can find a winning move. If you want, you can always pause, but I think we just have a simple capture. Capture this, and basically if they had recaptured that, we would be able to just win a pawn. So that's just a free pawn that we can take. We are up a pawn, but of course our opponent is also doing some counterplay. We have to be very careful, because if we just keep pawn grabbing, we would basically be losing we would be losing this knight here. So we have to react to their move. They are attacking our knight. Whenever your opponent makes a move, I always recommend to pause for a moment and just think, what was their piece doing previously and what is their piece doing now? And I can recognize that previously it was protecting this pawn and that knight, I think. Now it is also protecting those, but it is also attacking our knight. And if you always do this short calculation of what is their piece doing now, it's very hard to make any mistakes. So what I will do is I will activate my rook. I actually don't know which rook is the best. I think this one might actually have a defensive purpose. This one is just completely useless. So I'll activate my rook, guard my knight, and this also should allow for some tactics. Because even if they recapture, I mean, with the rook and queen lined up, there were going to be tactics anyways. So that is fine, but they are moving the queen. So if you want to find the best move for yourself, go ahead and calculate a little bit. But in general, it's always the same. We basically are now in a very dynamic position where usually the CCT will be the most important. It checks, the captures, the threats. We also can't forget every single time they make a move to quickly check what they are doing. And they are also threatening here to take this pawn. But I think this position is highly dynamic and there are so many things going on. My first idea is, what if we just trade some pawns? For example, I take this, they take here, which makes the most sense, but then we still have some extra captures at the end of the variation. And no matter what, I have to say, even if a bunch of things got traded, that this is looking very, very promising for black. And even if you can't calculate this far, I hope you can see that if we can open up this bishop, that will be very good for black. So I think there are a bunch of good moves here. I think taking here is a good move. I think maybe knight to c5 might also be an interesting move. Let me show you, for example, this. And then if they take, I think we can just continue, for example. And again, we are in a position where it's amazing for black. So I think I'm just going to keep capturing here and capture this. And okay, so they move the rook a little bit confusing. Maybe they want to protect this pawn or prevent us from pushing, which I think is fine. Um, Again, black to move. What did their move do? Protected the pawn, stopped us from pushing. Um, Also disconnected the rooks in a sense, so that makes this bishop even stronger. So yeah, the question is, what are we going to do now? In general, I recommend always to use the CCT. So if you want, you can always pause and do some calculation and see what you can find. Checks, we don't have any captures. We do have a capture. We actually have two captures we can capture here. And I think that might be a winning move, because if they take, they are losing the rook. If they take, they are losing the queen. And if they take the rook, we actually have a check with the knight, and then we win the rook at the end of the variation. So I think that just taking this just wins as another pawn. I think taking it with the bishop would be wrong, because then we have a different type of variation where at the end we lose this piece. But taking this with the knight, I think, is the best move. And I know things are going a little bit fast now, but the most important part was way at the beginning, at the start of the middle game, to figure out what the position is all about, to come up with multiple plans. And from that we identified we had this plan with the bishop, and yeah, now it's basically just CCT all the way, checks, captures, threats. That was a check and a capture, so that was the right move. And then I can take this. Also, this is opened up. So I think everything is just collapsing. They just moved the rook, meaning they dropped another pawn. So that's another capture. And now we are also very close to promotion, which is a new threat that we potentially have. They are moving away the knight, so they are no longer in trouble. They're also threatening to do a check, which is not really a problem. They can't go in here, and they can't go to c5. So I think we can just try to see if there is a promotion threat. And even if they take, we can just trade a bunch of pieces. And then I think we can win this pawn here at the end of the variation. And I am speeding up, but we are already up 4 points of material. And whenever you are up 4 points of material, there's basically only one thing that you need to think about. And that is to trade. Like this. That's another trade. We are forcing a rook trade. And now we just have an endgame in which I think we have just 4 extra pawns. So what is the plan here? We have 4 extra pawns. And 4 extra pawns means we would have a really good time in general here to promote. Promoting, I think, is our biggest opportunity that we have. But we also need to be a little bit careful that we don't start dropping a bunch of pawns. So I will play here pawn to c5. And even if they try to hunt down the last couple of pawns, I think the most important thing that we can do here is to try to promote. How can we promote? We want to push pawns. This would be dropping a pawn. This would also be dropping a pawn. So I'm basically thinking, can we just use them together as an army and start pushing? For example, with pawn to a6 first, and then moving up the other pawns. If they attack, it doesn't matter. I'm going to push pawn to a5 now. I can basically keep going. They are attacking my bishop. I think we can move it. I think honestly we can even push, which might sound a little bit crazy, but I think if we just keep pushing, there is no way for them to stop the promotion actually. Yeah, they can't stop the promotion, and the king cannot even get close enough. So yeah, I will actually just push, because it's something important to learn that in these endgames, usually just pushing your pawns is the only strategy that you need, and you don't need to overcomplicate things. You don't even really need to worry about losing some material. If you just keep pushing your pawns, you will make a queen. And the moment you have a queen, it is very easy to do double attacks. So to start giving a check and also attack a piece at the same time. We still have to, of course, figure out a checkmate. How can we do that? Well, we have a queen and dark squared bishop, so that's double dark basically. We have 2 dark squared pieces. They only have a king and a light squared bishop, so they will have huge problems on the dark squares. So if I start attacking dark squares, for example like this, basically it doesn't matter that they have this bishop. I can just start grabbing their pawns, keep giving them checks, and they can't really do much. Yes, I know that I am here losing a pawn along the way. I'm actually going to capture this, losing a pawn along the way, but it doesn't matter much since of course you're always winning in this type of position. And again, I think it's about the dark squared issues. They have this which is under attack. I think we can just attack it twice and we can win that. And now I think there should be a checkmate here, let's calculate the fastest checkmate. Because the king is already cut off, I think honestly, we might have this move, bishop to f6. Bishop to f6, just a dark square checkmate. And I don't think there's anything they can do. If they move the king, that's a checkmate, and if they do anything else, that's also a checkmate. So here you can also see how you can basically completely ignore that they have that one piece remaining. They are playing a super tricky move here. I hope you see that taking this would be very bad, because now that is a stalemate. The enemy king can't go anywhere, so we can't capture this bishop. But if we just ignore it and we stay on the dark squares, there's basically nothing they can do, and I think we just have a very simple dark squared checkmate. So I hope this video was helpful and that you will be able to try to think like this during your own games as well. If you want to learn more, you should watch this video next.